Well, we are done and dusted with the group stage, and the four semi-finalists are out there for everyone to see. It's Australia, West Indies, South Africa, and England. Yeah, not exactly did we get our predictions right when it came to the semi-finalist spots, but we will be talking about why that's the case and what happened with each of the 8 sides that crashed out of the tournament. So that and much more in this video. So make sure you've hit the like button if you haven't already. Make sure you've subscribed to Women's Cricket Central if you haven't already. And of course, do also check out Jeet Vachirajani on X if you haven't already. But coming to the World Cup, Jeet, once again, we know the semi-finals. We saw how the group stage ended with the India-Australia clash. In some sense, it was on par with our expectations, but also it wasn't.
I think, look, it was more or less on par. I think you're probably referring to that spot of the West Indies over New Zealand. But I do recollect that, while previewing West Indies, we did also say that if there is a team that can push New Zealand or get ahead of New Zealand and qualify for the semis, and it has to be the West Indies. So it was fairly on par because we did consider that possibility as well. And I think it was fairly straightforward as well. So pretty good job, at least on our part, in terms of getting most of the things right here. Semis for Group A, I think, again, it was pretty clear cut that there were three teams that were under contention, and India, South Africa was a massive clash, and the winner was always going to have the advantage. Now, South Africa, of course, also gave good chances to India by having quite a few close games against some of the other opponents. But it came down to India, Australia, and that was again going to be a very tough opponent for India to overall. And well, the result is something that we did anticipate.
Yeah, talking about each of the sides, let's just go alphabetically. So starting off with Bangladesh, once again, in terms of results, we did expect them to win no more than, the one or probably two games at best versus Pakistan, if you include that encounter. All in all, what did you make of the performance this World Cup?
I would say they had a pretty good tournament because at the start of the tournament, they happened to be the only side which had never played a T20 in England. So they didn't had familiarity with the conditions. So if you would have given them 2 wins by the end of the group stage, I think they would have taken it because Netherlands was always going to be an opponent that was relatively easier for them to, face in the game on itself. But opponents to follow thereafter were going to be really challenging with Australia, Pakistan, India, and then finishing off with South Africa. They did a pretty good job against Pakistan. They ended up winning that game despite being in a very, very tight situation where Pakistan were running away with it. Then I felt that they gave a good account of themselves against India as well, dragging the game for as long as they can. And the same thing happened in the last game as well against South Africa. So overall, I still felt that, they would be still happy with the way this tournament panned out because the conditions still end up suiting them a lot more, something that we didn't really expect. We thought that it's going to be flat conditions and the batters will have to up their game a lot and ensure that bowlers have enough to defend. It just felt as if, the conditions end up being a little bit more familiar, which meant that the spinners came into the action a lot more and turned out to be a lot more effective. Ritu Moni with her cutters also turned out to be really effective. So at the end of the day, or at least at the end of the tournament, I feel Bangladesh would be really happy with how it really turned out for them.
In fact, we'd spoken about how it's their batting that would be a bit of a letdown because they do not have a lot of batters, who can bat with intent, and that continued to be the case. They unfortunately ended the tournament as the only side with a run rate less than 6 in a tournament where the average run rate was was hovering near 7.5. You would have to score or do a lot more than 5.9, which is what they ended up with. Although Juwaria, Firdaus, Dilara Akhtar, they showed glimpses of what they are capable of. Hopefully, going forward, once they do get more opportunities, we might see them sort of bloom into some sort of attacking monsters that Bangladesh are in dire need for. But talking about the bowling as well, Jeet, we've spoken about how that is going to be the department that will have to shoulder bulk of the responsibility for them. And they did that with great aplomb, right? Because they took a wicket every 17 balls, which was the 4th or the 5th best, beg your pardon, in the tournament. Not too bad. They conceded runs at only 6.7 per over. And this despite, bowling to the likes of Australia, South Africa and India, 3 big teams. And even then for them to not let their run rate go past or conceding at more than 7 runs per over, job well done for sure.
Yeah, the job was pretty well done with the spinners. I still felt the spinners did a far better job than the Pacers. Maruf Akhtar was amongst the wickets, but still she didn't end up having the kind of impact that at least I anticipated from her. They started off with Sanjeeda Akhtar, something that we did feel could happen because Nahida was a lot more out of form in the tri-series heading into the main tournament, and Sanjeeda was doing a pretty good job, including the warm-up games as well. So rightly, Bangladesh backed the informed player in Sanjeeda or Nahida, but as the tournament progressed, it did become a possibility where they will end up having both the left-arm spinners in their side. That's exactly what happened. So Faria Trishna went out and they ended up backing Nahida Akhtar as well, along with Sanjeeda. So I felt that attack also worked really well in conjunction. I felt Rabea was still I expected a lot more wickets from her. She did a good job in containing the runs, but the wickets were still not as many as I thought. I think the plans also were terrific, although having said that, because what I observed throughout the tournament and something that I felt most of the opponents were not able to pick up with is the fact that she bowled the first over with those in drifters. A wrist spinner, I cannot quite call it googlies because they were released in a different manner and the ball just kind of seemed into the right or swung into the right handers. And that was only restricted to the first over because in the remaining 3 overs of a spell, she started spinning the ball away from the right handers. And I think this is something that quite a few batters fell for. I think Stair Callis fell to that in drifter in the game in the first game, and then I think India struggled to pick up this variation once Rabia was done with her first one, started spinning it away from the right-handers. The field placements were good. They were bowling to the field as well. Marufa, I still felt that she had a bit of a different role this time. They went a lot more heavier in the power play with her at times, or at least most of the time she ended up bowling 3 overs up front and they kept that 1 over for the back end. And Ritu Moni, I think, did a pretty good job in the middle overs as well. So overall, I still felt that as a bowling unit, they did a pretty good job.
What you said about Rabia Khan and Bangladesh in general, that was out there for everyone to see, especially in the India-Bangladesh encounter. I really thought they were the better side tactically. It was just that the batters did not put enough on board for their bowlers to be able to defend, or else up until the 15th, 16th over before sort of Jemmy really took the attack to the Bangla bowlers, I thought the game was genuinely hanging in balance. What was interesting about Rabia Khan was the fact that she isn't your conventional leg spinner, even from her point of release. She releases it front of her hand and it's usually her fingers that she uses. She's not a wrist spinner per se. But that's that from Bangladesh. Next up, of course, we will have to talk about Team India, who were in the hunt for the semi-final spot till the last group stage game versus Australia. In fact, some might argue even till the second half of the second innings, they were very well in the hunt to win that game. But unfortunately, wasn't to be the case. They were comprehensively beaten by Australia, something we expected. Again, what do you make of India's World Cup, Jeet? Because we'd spoken about how we don't fancy them making the semi-finals. All in all, would you say the way they performed or the way they played their cricket on par with what you expected?
Yeah, definitely on par with what we expected. Disappointing end, but I think it was pretty clear cut that against weaker teams, you are going to perform, you are going to smash them. You'll feel that everything is right about whatever decisions are being taken. Every spot is fine. The bowling tactics are fine, the batting tactics are fine, but all these holes only get exposed when you face the stronger teams, and that happened first against South Africa and it happened against Australia as well. It's just that against some of the weaker teams also we started putting the catches down and some of the weaknesses were being exposed, but they were never addressed. I felt even heading into the tournament there was no sort of a clarity in terms of what your preferred first 11 or the starting 11 is going to be, because every game we saw some of the other player that was getting replaced. So I felt that there wasn't that clarity that was there in the Indian management in terms of selecting the players and having the roles fixed. And I think that really came down heavily on India in terms of costing them that semi-final spot. I felt in both games, India had their chances. I'll be fair about that. Against South Africa, there was a chance when they were trying to defend the score of 158 runs. And against Australia also, I felt that there were moments could have gone India's favour. At least if they would have been captured or seized by India, then the result could have been a lot more close than what it turned out to be. So India just lost out on those crucial moments. But I just felt that they deserved to, because there were quite a few things that were wrong with the side, be it the squad or be it the playing 11 or be it the tactics. Everything was wrong. So if India had progress, then these things would have just felt fine. And I don't think that would have been a good thing in the longer run.
Completely agreed. I mean, tactically, they genuinely look listless, if we're being completely honest, or if at least I'm being completely honest. Couldn't make a lot of sense of the selections. You've spoken about the paces. That's something, we've also spoken about time and time again. It seemed like they did not have a pecking order of sorts. They weren't too sure who their best pacers were, who did they want to stick to. In fact, by the end of the tournament, seeing someone like a Radha Yadav also play a role with the ball was a bit surprising. But Jeet, we'll also have to talk about Yastika Bhatia, because that was a player that we spent a lot of time on pre-World Cup. And clearly, one thing that we can say with confidence is the fact that she wasn't fit. And in fact, one might even ask or question the COE for clearing someone like, on what basis was she cleared to play a World Cup, because she did not seem fit at all. And in hindsight, once again, do you think it was a wise move to have Yastika Bhatia in the 11?
There was no point having her in the squad. Backup options, backup wicketkeeper options, maybe something that we could have looked into, because over the last 24 months or so, there have been a few wicketkeepers who have been associated with the side, but nobody's got a long run. Even Uma Chetri came in and went out. Shweta Sehrawat is still work in progress as a wicketkeeper. So at least to begin with, I think, like you pointed out, I have the same question. How was she cleared by the COE in terms of fitness, because she can't run. Let's face it. The way she runs, we know that there is still some sort of a problem that she's having right now. She's not 100%. When a player is not 100%, how does that player get selected in the squad for the World Cup? That is, having picked her in the squad, it's just that it was a fight between her and Bharti Fulmali, and that was the only thing I was weighing up in terms of who is better, who is not. Even say a 60% fit Yastika Bhatia is still better than Bharti Fulmali or not. That was the only thing I had on my mind, which is why I still wanted Yastika over Bharti Fulmali. But there was this instance against Australia as well in the last group game where we know that she, fields at fine leg, and this is what we talked about in our video about India and Australia and how India can defeat Australia. And we talked and addressed that issue that she's the fine leg position and she is that weaker point for India in the field because she can't run. And we did see that instance, where the ball did end up going to fine leg and Australia end up running 4. I have no idea how they did that, but they end up running 4 because there was Yastika Bhatia was chasing it. So yeah, it's just unfortunate. She has the skill sets. There is no denying that. She has done a decent job in this format of the game. I still feel that she hasn't really lived up to the sort of potential she has, because I feel her power game against spinners has gone up a lot more over the last 2 years. Against pace, she still relies a lot more on the timing. She's a touch player against pacers, but just the fact that she's not fit enough. So why should she be in the squad?
One more question that we will have to address or try and address to the best of our abilities, Jeet, will have to be Harmanpreet Kaur. What do you now think of her in the sense, where does the Indian team start actually looking at moving past her? Because they've got an ICC Champions Trophy coming up next year. That's also going to be played in the T20 format. They've also got a T20 World Cup in 2028 along with the LA Olympics. Then, of course, comes the behemoth, which is the ODI World Cup. But at some point in time, surely the Indian team will have to focus on transitioning past Harman.
Yeah, I think they need to have a conversation with her as to what is she looking for to in the remainder of her career or in the future with the next set of major tournaments that are on their way. And if she is willing to continue as a skipper, and I still feel a few hard calls need to be taken now, because it's all about preparing the next captain. It's something, look, at least I personally wanted Smriti to take over after Mithali retired, but it was more specific to one format of the game and not the other format. But now the time is running out. It's the second tournament in a row in the T20 format, second T20 World Cup in a row where India has crashed out in the group stages. So how far are we wanting to go with Harmanpreet? I think she's a terrific batter. We saw that against Australia. I think she's still one of the best ball strikers in women's cricket right now. And the intent is the only problem where I think you would probably question her. It's not her stroke play. But as a skipper, tactically, I think we have had issues for a long time now. It's not that, these are issues that have, been dug out of the ground during this tournament only. These issues is something that have been going on for a long time now. The only way to address it is now looking towards a new skipper. It could be anyone, be it Smriti, be it Jemima, whomever the selection committee deems fit for that particular role. But it needs to happen now so that, when the next T20 World Cup tournament is ready, we have the new skipper who has taken charge and has the experience of leading her own side.
That's my biggest concern. The reason why I even mentioned, the upcoming ICC events was the fact that it now becomes a very convenient excuse, right? Okay, we've got a Champions Trophy coming up in less than 12 months. So let's just have Harman because it's easier. We don't have to focus on transition at a short notice. And then a year after the Champions Trophy, you've got another T20 World Cup coming up. You've got the LA Olympics coming up. So if they want to hide, they will continue hiding. If they want to just sit on it, they'll continue sitting on it. And my fear is that they will probably just continue doing that until Harman just says, you know what, it's physically not possible for me to carry on as the Indian skipper or as their mainstay in the middle order. So we'll have to see how they look at it. But I guess that's that from Team India. We won't be seeing them play a lot of bilaterals in the near future because there's the 100. And then after that, if I'm not wrong, the next assignment is versus Zimbabwe at home, where they play a 3 T20I series and a 3 ODI series. So until then, it'll be a bit of a breather for most of the players, a much needed breather because they've been playing non-stop cricket for the better part of the last 4 to 5 months. So yeah, good time for them to just take a break and recuperate, of course, later on. Moving to the next team, which is Ireland, a historic World Cup for them. Ireland finally managed to break their losing streak and win their first ever World Cup encounter. And no, it wasn't versus Scotland like we might have thought or assumed. It was against West Indies. And again, a side that's made it to the semi-finals has been defeated by a side that had never won a World Cup encounter. A performance to be proud of.
Yeah, I think they've ended the tournament on a good note because I think they had a pretty disappointing start for the first 4 games, because there were a couple of results where I really felt that they pushed some of the teams. And against England also, they did a decent job in defending a pretty low score. But having lost 4 out of 4 games, heading into that last game against the West Indies, I think it was a sensational job to pull it off, because I think during the tri series as well, I think they defeated the West Indies for the first time ever. So I think that is something that they probably drew a lot of confidence out of, and they were able to convert it over here. Overall, as a campaign, I still feel they would be a touch disappointed, but still it was on the expected lines in terms of what we expected, because they had quite a few issues, heading into the tournament. At least in the start of the tournament, we did talk about their brittle middle order. After the top 3 or top 4 batters, the middle order was really inexperienced. And the same thing we talked about their spinners as well. Amy Maguire's effectiveness had dropped, is something we had discussed, and Cara Murray's discipline was a concern. And I think that is something that was in play for the first 2 or 3 games. In the last few games, it really changed, because Maguire really turned the screws on pretty much every opponent with the new ball. And then Cara Murray really stepped up in the last 2 games as well. And I felt that Lara McBride also did a pretty decent job in containing the runs as Nofi when she was picked as well. I still felt that their bowling unit did a pretty decent job. One of the things that I think most of the people didn't talk about with Ireland was their death bowling as well. I felt Orla Prendergast at the death, I think she was just bowling the one over the last 4 overs, but she was really smart in terms of how she went about it. Again, there were quite a few slow balls involved, but with her being somebody who was really pacey, she was using her yorkers and bouncers really well at a high pace. And she had the services of Eva Canning for a game or two, and then Arlene Kelly joined her, with Eva Canning getting ruled out. And I felt that this duo did a tremendous job at the death with the ball in most of the games. The batting, I think, was a bit of an issue, because Gabby Lewis came into the tournament off an injury, so she didn't have enough of game time behind her. So as the tournament progressed, she got better, and we saw the impact in the last 2 or 3 games that Ireland played, because Gabby Lewis was able to, get in that groove and start scoring runs. And I think that made a big difference as well. And then, of course, Orla Prendergast being Orla Prendergast, I think she just turned the screws on the West Indies and, did the job for Ireland.
Yeah, that death bowling in particular was impressive for them. They conceded runs at only 6.9 per over, the second lowest for any side in the tournament. So that was fantastic. And not only that, they picked a wicket every 11 deliveries, the fourth best for any side in the group stage. So that was definitely a performance that they would want to keep in mind. And of course, when it comes to batting, I agree with you. Something we'd spoken about earlier as well. There is going to be a bit of that dependence. Also, because a lot of that experience was concentrated in the batting lineup. The bowlers, almost every bowler barring Arlene Kelly and of course all our Prendergast, were making their World Cup debut. So it wasn't going to be easy, big occasion, big stage, and for them to show up this way and still pull up the socks. It was fantastic watch. Fingers crossed we'll get to see them play a lot more bilaterals going forward. They, in fact, have been one of the few sides who've, sort of played a lot of bilateral cricket, and you could see that, how it's improved the way they've played, especially at a stage like the World Cup. And hopefully we'll see a lot more of that. We've earlier also mentioned how there is an ICC Emerging Nations tournament that's scheduled to happen next year. Tournaments like these will definitely help sides like Ireland. But speaking about the next side, which is also from Europe, Netherlands, of course, a side that was making the T20 World Cup debut, and unfortunately they ended it winless, but that's not what we were expecting from them any which ways. Jeet, once again, when it came to expectations, one thing we wanted to see them was potentially try and bat 20 overs out. And they did that multiple times.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the highlights of the tournament for me, which is the Dutch team overall and how they performed, the kind of energy they brought into this tournament, because there were quite a few instances where they were struggling to take a single wicket, used to fall after 10 overs, but they used to celebrate it with the whole heart. So, that was quite good to watch. I just love the kind of bravery that they showed. I think one of the things that you did point out about was the fact that they wanted to bat out the 20 overs, but it's a bravery, They always had the choice of winning the toss, batting first, getting blown off for 60, 70 runs. The opposition will just chase it down 8, 9 overs, go home, game done. You won't learn anything from that. Game 2 against India, Game 3 against Australia, and Game 4 against South Africa. In all these 3 games, they won the toss and decided to bowl first. It's a team that has struggled with the ball, yet they did that. And I think that was a great call, because it ensured that the bowlers got to learn something from it. They bowled 20 overs against some of the best teams in the world. It's fine. You are going to make errors and all the teams will end up conceding or end up scoring 200 runs. It's fine, but at least you learn something out of it. And as the tournament progressed, we did see that, the things that they started learning from Game 2 onwards were being implemented as the tournament progressed. And it did work out well because they started doing a pretty good job at the back end of the tournament. I think they did a really good job against Pakistan as well. They almost pulled off a win. So I think this was because of the brave call of wanting to bowl first and giving the bowlers 20 overs to bowl at some of the best batters. And then in response, just look to bat out the 20 overs. That's fine. You know that you're probably not going to chase down a target. But if your batters get some sort of a practice or some sort of a game time or being out there in the middle against some of the best bowlers, I think there is nothing better than that. So for them as a team, I felt that this tournament was learning curve. I was never going to look at the results that they are going to get out of this particular tournament in any of the 5 games. It was more about learning. It was more about being on this stage for the first time ever and just experiencing and enjoying the kind of moments that they got. And I think they did a splendid job. And against a team like Australia were not able to dismiss either of them. So I was just looking through some of the records after that game, and I realized that it was just a second or third instance in the T20 history against Australia that Australia were not able to pick up a wicket for a stretch of over 15 overs. And for the Dutch to do that was a sensational job. Nobody was able to take a wicket. It's forget the intent part. At least they showed the technique and the mentality to be out there and just brave it out. So I think that was a sensational job as well.
Managing to restrict Pakistan to just 126 was an achievement in and of itself. And even the fact that while batting versus South Africa, they were chasing a mammoth 208. They had a brilliant power play where they scored 50 runs. In fact, they lost only 2 wickets till the first 16 overs. So that was also very good to see. I know the end scorecard might read 120 for 8, and you might think, yeah, of course, this was a very lopsided encounter and it's ended that way. But about the batting, Gurjeet, yeah, what did you make of that?
It was decent in patches. Heather Seegers, we talked about her intent up top, and I think she did a good job in most of the games where she was able to get the Netherlands off to quick starts. Stair Callis was decent. I still felt that she could have been a lot more given her quality as a batter. Overall, yeah, I think a lot more was dependent upon Babette, Stair, and to an extent Heather Seegers. Out of these 3 batters, it was pretty much a lot more about learning for all the other batters that were involved.
Definitely. I mean, Babette also brought up a 50 in the very first game for Netherlands. That was also very heartening to see. Yeah, they are only going to improve from here. That bowling attack in particular, they copped a lot. While playing some of the other oppositions, understandably so. Once again, they've not played a lot of sides when it comes to the kind of caliber we're talking about. But the side that we're next going to talk about was a side that's genuinely surprised us all or shocked us all. I don't know how you want to put it, but Jeet, talking about the land down under, not Australia, it's their Trans-Tasman rivals, New Zealand. We did peg them to be one of our semi-finalists. Not only did they not enter the top 4, they lost to Sri Lanka and West Indies and almost to Ireland. Boy, has this been a tournament for them to forget.
Yeah, it was quite a disappointing tournament for them. I think those first 2 clashes were really important in terms of setting up the remainder of the tournament for them. And to be fair, both these games were in their hands. These were 2 games that they should have easily ended up winning by 30, 40 or 50 runs. No kidding. It should have been that big a margin. That is how well they were at a particular situation. But from that particular situation, whatever transpired in the field is something that, lost them both the games. And then I just felt that, they lost confidence as a team altogether because it just reflected everywhere in all facets of the game. The bowlers were decent. The numbers don't look good for pretty much anyone, but I would put it down to a little bit of the drop catches as well having its influence, because had those catches been held, it could have looked a lot more different for pretty much every bowler. Ireland ran them really close. Scotland also had done a pretty good job before Izzy Sharp stepped up. Yeah, it was a disappointing tournament, especially as defending champions and having pretty much the same side as the last particular tournament, barring of course Fran Jonas and I think Eden Carson.
But talking about silver linings, Jeet, once again, this is definitely going to be a World Cup. They would want to forget as soon as possible, but the middle order didn't do too badly. In fact, we were one of the better batting sides or the best batting sides in the middle overs phase. Sophie Devine, Neely Kerr, to some extent, even Izzy Shah, Brooke Halliday, all of them contributed, in bits and pieces across the tournament, something that they would want to take some confidence from.
Decent performances, I would say. Brooke Halliday, maybe the strike rate could have been better, but she often found herself in those rebuilding phases. And over there also, I felt that there were a lot of dot balls that were involved. So she was not able to rotate the strike as fluently as I've known her to. Maddie Green, I felt that she had a pretty decent tournament, probably arguably one of the best batters for New Zealand coming out of this tournament. But otherwise, Izzy Sharp, I still felt there was one good performance that came against Scotland. In other games, I felt that she didn't bat where she is naturally accustomed to. She was batting way down the order, and being there as a finisher is something that she's not used to in the domestics. she bats at number 3. Now the first game that she bats number 3 in this tournament, she ends up scoring a 50. And then again against England, she ended up scoring a duck at number 4. I think she will draw some confidence out of this tournament that she had with the bat. As a fielder, I think, yeah, there were quite a few issues that she had putting down the catch against the West Indies of Hayley Matthews. Then one of the throws that we saw to the wicketkeeper, that was just far away. It went over the middle of the pitch. But yeah, if I've got to look at New Zealand overall, then I feel Izzy Sharp is the perfect batter who can replace Sophie Devine in terms of the power game. I still feel that, the real challenge starts now because, of course, 3 of the best players have retired now. In their absence, who is going to come into the side? How do the roles of other players change in this side? Because Maddie Green and Brooke Halliday will become the senior batters in this for the side along with Millie Kerr. So even their roles can change now going forward in terms of where they bat.
100%. Lots should be disappointed, especially because they were entering the World Cup as defending champions and they definitely did not play like one. And they'll be the first ones to admit that, of course. Hopefully, fingers crossed, Millie Kerr, draws a lot of inspiration from the senior pros who will be retiring after this World Cup or who already have retired technically after the World Cup. So moving on to the next side, yet another side that only flattered to deceive us. We're talking about, of course, Pakistan. A lot more expectations. 100% they've definitely not delivered on practically any of them. Jeet, thoughts on the Pakistani side?
I expected 2 wins for them from this tournament, but I think one of the things that we had mentioned during our previews was the fact that they have got one of the toughest starts in the tournament because they've got India and South Africa first up. And when you're facing 2 strong teams in your first 2 games, it's going to be a challenge, because if they end up in losses for you, it's going to spiral downwards for you because you won't be able to gather momentum. You will lose confidence as a team. And I think that is something that was in play because against Bangladesh, they end up losing game 3. They were in a position where they needed a runner ball with 8 wickets in hand. How do you lose from that particular position? Just chasing 124. It just showed the kind of a corner that they were, kind of confined to, and they just never got out of it. Then they faced Australia, got a complete hammering there. And the last game, it was Netherlands who also almost pulled it off. In a way, I'm just happy because I'm hoping that this would open up the eyes of those who are making these decisions. And so whether those hard decisions will be made or not, well, we don't know about that, but we can only hope that, those hard decisions will be made. But otherwise, yeah, I was really disappointed. Some of the batting and everything that I've seen, I was not expecting them to be this bad.
That batting in particular, Jeet, was just woeful because this is something we've spoken about even up top when we preview this side. Fatima Sana, of course, has really done a good job. You've got the experience of Muniba Ali, but apart from that, there's really not a lot to look at. In fact, if we look at even numbers, they were easily one of the worst batting sides when it came to scoring runs. They scored it just 6 runs per over, which is the second worst. Apart from that, they also lost the wicket every 12 deliveries. That is extremely bizarre because the next worst is still at 18 balls per dismissal. So they were by far the worst side and by some distance. And even when you split it across phases, if you look at it from a power play standpoint, once again, the worst batting side. When you look at the death overs, worst batting side. When you look at the middle overs, worst batting side. You split it into middle overs 1, middle overs 2. Even then across those 2 phases, they were the worst batting side phase after phase. Just nothing seemed to work for them.
I just didn't like what I saw in the last game as well. Fine, it's a Dutch. I mean, they've struggled a lot and the pitch was slightly testing as well. But there's just no intent from any of the batters. To me, look, I'll be very frank, but I just felt as if all the batters were playing for their spot. Everybody wanted runs behind the back, runs in their kitty so that they can show that, okay, we performed well. Please select us going forward as well. And the technique I saw, I just could not believe some of the technique that I saw in display from Gul Firoza. I was just so surprised from Gul Firoza as well. Somebody who's attacking as a batter and has a job in the power play. She was not even willing to attack, and just the way she was getting beaten. Even Eman Fatima, I mean, what I've watched at the under-19 level to what I watched in this particular game, I could see why she was benched. Just horrible. The first 6 balls, she couldn't score a single run. I think of the 7th ball, where she actually connected it well, she was dismissed. So it seemed as if, she's a batter who can connect the ball well. But the question is, how many times does she connect the ball? The first 6 balls, she struggled entirely. So the entire batting unit looked like that. Technically, they were so weak. It just felt pretty horrible, throughout. And I think one of the things I'd looked into, the batting order of the top 6 or top 7 batters, at least the top 6 batters specifically here. I noticed that they had changed it for 20 T20Is in a row before the game against the Netherlands. I don't know what they fielded. I don't remember. I didn't look into it. But at least before the game against the Netherlands, they had 20 T20s or 21 T20s in a row where at least one spot was changed of the top six batters. Everybody's getting changed. Nobody has a role clarity. Nobody knows what they are doing at what particular role. And I think that is one of the reasons why we saw so many runouts as well, because they are not used to batting with each other, because each time somebody or the other gets replaced. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed all in all with the batting. The bowling was still perhaps the saving grace for them, because Fatima did a decent job. She, again, was expensive most of the times, but at least she did a decent job. Sadia was good. Nasra did better. But other than these three, I was still disappointed with the other bowlers as well.
Even with the bowling, of course, the spinners did a very good job, like Jeet mentioned, going at only 6.4 runs per over, also taking wickets regularly. But pacers, Fatima Sana did take a few wickets here and there. Like you said, she was expensive, and so were her partners, whoever it is that they went for, either Tasmia Rubab or Diana Baig. And unfortunately, once again, the numbers are there for everyone to see. Firstly, they did not rely a lot on pace. Only 30% of the overs bowled by Pakistan were from pacers, which was the lowest for any of the 8 teams that are out of the tournament. And apart from that, they went at 8.4 runs per over. Second was only after Netherlands. Once again, you shouldn't be comparing yourselves to a side that's making its World Cup debut, and that's unfortunately where they are at right now. They really have to pull their socks up. And spinners, of course, did their job pretty well, and that's something we've spoken about even during the preview. It's that spin attack that they will really be relying upon. Sadia Iqbal, Nashra Sanduk to some extent if they want, even Tuba Hassan. And Rabin Shamim also wasn't the worst of options considering how the pacers were faring. That's definitely something that they will have to probably take some heart from. But talking about the next side, Jeet, Scotland, of course, experience was definitely not something they were lacking in, at least when it came to experience in these conditions. We've spoken about how this is a side that could potentially punch above its weight. Unfortunately, not a lot of wins to show for, but still a performance to be very proud of.
Yeah, I think the experience in conditions was not that big a question. It was the experience in situations that was a question mark, and I think that is where I think they probably struggled to counter and convert the winning position into wins. I think this is something we discussed before. So had they got this experience of being in situations of high pressure environments, or where your team can pull off a win if you have, or if you seize a crucial moment in the game. I think we saw that in most of the games. They had a good start against Ireland, something that we did expect, being at Manchester, and a lot more familiarity that their players had over the Irish players at Manchester. I think it was going to be in favor of them. But after that, it was going to be challenged because the opponents got stronger. West Indies ended up winning by 7 runs. England game was okayish. They lost by 38 runs, but were still able to put over 160 runs on the board in the run chase. Against New Zealand, they had their moments as well. And against Sri Lanka also, they had the moments. So this is something that can only come with experience, I feel, because they are not used to being in this sort of situation or such high pressure situations. Because chasing, say, 20 of last 2 overs, playing for a county side and doing that for a nation are two different things altogether, and that can only happen with more and more experience. It's sad. I mean, most of the players were not feeling so good after the last game that they had, or the loss they had. There were quite a few tears in the camp, unfortunately. But look, it's a learning curve for them. The same for Ireland and Netherlands as well. Yeah, just learn from it. I think they'll get better. It's still a very young side. I think I would still say there ended up being more positives than negatives for them overall in the tournament. There's a lot more that they can take out of this tournament and be happy about, even though results may not kind of back it up, but the numbers might back it up for some of the individual players. And I think they can draw a lot of confidence out of that.
One thing that I was genuinely surprised by was how professional they were beat on the field or even with the bat in hand. We keep talking about how it is important to just keep scoring runs. Of course, they scored at 7.5 runs per over, which was more than decent and above the tournament average. But apart from that, when you look at this plot, which is non-boundary strike rate versus boundary percentage, yeah, they were well and truly in the middle table muddle there, amongst the likes of South Africa, New Zealand, West Indies, Sri Lanka. All of them are sides who come with a plethora of experience, and Scotland did not seem like they were fish out of water, and that was very pleasantly surprising for me. Apart from that, of course, even when you look at their bowling effort, once again, we've spoken about how the variety that they possess is something that will definitely, play to their strengths. Unfortunately, Abtaha Maqsood was injured and ruled out of the tournament before their first game, and that meant that they were going to always miss that wrist spinner. But once again, the way they functioned, it almost seemed like they knew how to deal with situations like these two. But of course, when it came to in-match situations, like Jeet said, that will only come with time and experience. And fingers crossed, we'll get to see a lot more of them going forward in not just ICC events, but also bilaterals, because, yeah, we need a side like Scotland. Rachel Slater in particular was definitely a massive, massive bright spot for them. The way she bowled in the power play, very, very miserly through and through, and of course was also taking the odd wicket here or there. But yeah, she was as miserly as it could get, and that was something definitely, that they would be very happy about, right, Jeet?
Yeah, they should be. As a bowling unit, I think they still perform pretty well. Rachel Slater is a name that I was also looking forward to because the kind of impact she ended up having in the power play was insane. I think the word that he used, miserly, I think that's what I figured as well. She has developed so much, and we could see that, in play over here. She brought that experience to the fore, playing at Leeds as well, familiarity with the conditions over there as well. So the bowling unit in terms of the bowling unit or the spin attack in particular, pretty good as well. I think Catherine Fraser was on the expensive side, but I was still impressed, with some of her variations that she was having. Kirsty Gordon, again, a good experienced spinner who led the spin attack really well. Catherine Bryce, I think, started off pretty well. She did have a couple of bad games bowling at the death, but overall, at least when she was bringing her back into the attack, as a skipper, they were in tough situations, and she was often ending up getting a wicket in those sort of situations. So I quite like the way she performed as well, and I think she got decent support from Priyana Chatterjee whenever they went for her, or Darcy Carter as well. Again, don't look at the wickets column; it doesn't really matter. But so in terms of the role that they were asked to play in those sort of situations, I think they did a pretty good job.
But speaking about the last side today, Jeet, Sri Lanka, once again, Shamri unfortunately really threw herself under the bus, if that makes sense, in that presser ahead of the Ireland encounter, where she felt like a bit of a failure. That's what she had to say. A performance that was interesting, that was almost very mercurial, so to say. They did have 2 wins. They managed to defeat New Zealand, a result that I did not see coming. And of course, they also defeated Ireland. Pleasantly surprised, shocked. How would you put it?
Yeah, I didn't expect them to end with 6 points, to be very honest, but I wouldn't have been too surprised either because they had West Indies to face. So I thought maybe that is an encounter which could be really close and go in Sri Lanka's favor. They were in contention even on the last day. It's just that their net run rate was so bad that, it kind of made it really practically impossible for them. But in terms of the points or the wins that they had, I think it was good. And the fact that they were able to turn it around, because they started with the toughest opponent in the side in England, and they got a proper beating in that very first game with some of the tactics that were really weird with the bowling. But as the tournament progressed, I felt that they did get better in terms of their selections. Slightly still surprised the fact that, Malki Madra never even played a single game after playing against England. So they stuck with Mithali Ayodhya, who I felt had a pretty decent tournament because she was able to contain runs. Wickets or not, that's fine. But she got a role in the power play and she was bowling at the death. Development still will come. I think at the death, she ended up becoming too predictable, trying for at least 5 out of the 6 balls turning to be Yorkers. She was attempting Yorkers on most of the deliveries. So she got predictable for most of the batters who were looking to lap her. So those sort of things will happen again. She's a very, very young pacer. But I quite like Kavya Kavindi as well because she brought about different variety to this pace attack. As a pacer, could move the ball both ways. I think that is something that stood out for me. Control was a little bit off, but at least she had the potential, and that is something that she showed. The spin attack had to have a lot of reliance because just one pacer in the side practically, plus Nilakshi, of course. But the spinners had to do bulk of the job. I felt their most experienced spinner, Sugandhika, had a middling tournament because you would expect a lot out of her being at least one of the spearheads of the spin attack in this particular side. I think she was not as good. Kavisha Dilari, of course, stood out to me. I think I really enjoyed the bowling that she did. Her variations of off spin, wrist spin, the release. I'm a big fan of her release of off breaks or the off spin in general. It just stands out to me as compared to other off spinners that I see. Okay, tournament, I would say. There were, I think, quite a few positives that came out in the form of these new players like Mithali Ayodhya. I felt Kaushini Nutyangana was pretty good with her wicket-keeping skills. She had, I think, one bad game, but otherwise, some of the other games were just outstanding in terms of her work behind the stumps as well. So
yeah, with the ball in hand, one particularly surprising thing was the fact that, like you also said, and like we had discussed while previewing Sri Lanka, they would be depending on their spinners. And unfortunately, it was the spinners who let them down. In fact, the spin attack was the second worst when it came to economy. They conceded runs at 8.1 runs per over, only behind Netherlands. Once again, a side that you wouldn't necessarily want to compare yourselves against. Importantly, they also took a wicket only every 32 balls, which was by far the worst, including Netherlands as well. And that was a tad bit surprising. On the flip side, it was the pacers who actually did some sort of a job. And once again, even there, like Jeet mentioned, Mithali Ayodhya was a revelation, not because she took a lot of wickets, but because she was able to contain the runs. Her power play spells in a few games were really good. In fact, if I'm not wrong, it was versus Ireland where she conceded only 7 odd runs in 3 overs in the power play. But that was also really good to watch. In fact, she ended the tournament with the second best economy rate for anyone who'd bowled 15 overs or more, joint tied with Kim Garth. That was also fantastic to watch. And 100% that release is going to, be a bit of a differential, something we'd spoken about and something that I was genuinely looking forward to. And at the likes of Kaushini Nityangana, you've also got Hasini Pereira, who I think will get a bigger role going forward. I don't want to think that this World Cup is a sign of things to come. So I do feel Sri Lanka is doing a good job of preparing themselves in the post-Shamari Atapattu era. So that's hopefully going to be the case, and hopefully they will do a very good job of it. Anyways, that's that from this video. We were going to review each of the 8 sides, and I think that's exactly what we've done. Until then, it's a goodbye from both of us. Thank you so much for tuning in. And like I said up top, please make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already. Make sure you subscribe to Wins Cricket Central if you haven't already. And also do check out Jeet Vachirajani on X, and we will see you very soon.